Welcome to the On the Pen, the weekly dose podcast, your one-stop shop for obesity medicine news with your host, Man on the Pen, Dave Knapp. Welcome to the Tuesday, November 26, 2024 edition of On the Pen, the weekly dose podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Compound, that pen. And there is a wonderful bit of news today out of Washington, D.C., where the outgoing Biden administration has announced a massive policy change for Medicare. We're going to get into it, but before we do, would you hit that like, hit that bell, and hit that subscribe button so you make sure that you get notifications for everything we do here at On the Pen. The other ask is that if you're listening on the podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening, that you give us a 5-star rating and review. That helps more people to get the message for what we're doing here at On the Pen. So glad to be with you on this Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Plenty to be thankful for. Right near the top of my list is this community and everything you all do for me. Let's get into it. So is Medicare and Medicaid going to cover Zepbound? Here's why it's not quite as simple as it sounds, but we're going to unpack the whole thing here. So Medicare might finally be catching up with what we, the community, have known for years, and that's that obesity isn't just about weight. It's definitely not a personal failing. It's a chronic disease. In a move that could change the lives of millions of people, Medicare is proposing to expand coverage for anti-obesity medications under Part D and Medicaid plans. This isn't just a small tweak. This is a massive shift, and the ripple effects could reshape how society at large thinks about obesity, not to mention the payers, the PBMs, and the insurance companies. Access to treatment and even health equity in this country will be impacted by this move. It's huge. There's a lot more to the story than just the coverage changes, right? There's politics involved. The timing of this is very interesting. The Biden administration definitely waited till the 11th hour to make a move on this. Better late than never, as I always say, and that makes things very interesting. With a new administration set to take over in 2025, RFK Jr. Could be tapped to lead the NIH, and that's been making waves because he has been on a crusade about the cost of GLP-1 medications, while Dr. Marty Makary, chief medical officer at an obesity treating telehealth company, could land at the top of the FDA to further make things interesting. But we're going to break it all down. So the history of Medicare's approach to anti-obesity medication has been interesting. For the last 2 decades, Medicare Part D has excluded medications labeled for weight loss because that's what the Social Security Act said. It's told Medicaid and Medicare to exclude drugs used for anorexia, weight loss, or weight gain. And this blanket exclusion stuck even as science has evolved to recognize obesity as a chronic disease requiring medical interventions. Here's the frustrating part. Even medications prescribed to treat obesity, like GLP-1 receptor agonists, think Saxenda, Wegovy, Zepbound, didn't make the cut. The result, millions of people were left paying out of pocket for these life-changing treatments unless they were benefiting from the fact that they had a major comorbidity like type 2 diabetes. If you didn't have type 2 diabetes or more recently heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, you were left out of these medications. Millions of people were left out of these medications. Efforts like the Treat and Reduce Obesity Act have tried to fix this, but ultimately have fallen short, and patients have been left in a lurch once again, just looking, hoping, and wishing for something to change. Could this be it? Here's the new proposal. Here's what's changing. Now, Medicare is proposing a new way forward with obesity medicine. They're redefining the way that they look at obesity. And here's what it looks like. Coverage for anti-obesity medications, Medicare Part D, will cover medications prescribed for obesity treatment, like GLP-1 receptor agonists, specifically to reduce or maintain weight loss for people with an obesity diagnosis a BMI greater than 30. There's Medicaid implications. They're trying to bring Medicaid, which is co-sponsored with the federal government, but run at the state level. And they would also be required to cover certain anti-obesity medications in an attempt to address these long-standing disparities in access. And we know there's also disproportionate effects of obesity on minorities and communities with lesser means. Limits still do apply here. So if a medication is prescribed purely for weight loss without an obesity diagnosis, it's still excluded. But this is strictly for the diagnosis of obesity. It's huge. It recognizes that obesity is a disease, and it aligns with other federal policy where medicine is today. But we have to be clear on what this is and what it isn't. It isn't a cure-all, and it doesn't cover everything, but it's massive, massive progress. Let's take a look at the timing of all this. Here's where it gets really interesting. The proposed changes are set to roll out in 2026, so full year and change from now, assuming the rule is finalized. That timing lines up with some big political shifts. Obviously, we had a recent election, so the Trump administration will be taking over in 2025, and the political landscape could shape how this rule is implemented. Trump's policies around healthcare and drug pricing will undoubtedly play a role. And obviously the appointment of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his influence could be huge. He's been vocal about the high cost of GLP-1 medications, and his push to bring attention to drug pricing could intersect with Medicare's expanded coverage and further amplify this conversation. We could be talking about this for a good long while. Potential FDA shakeup because Dr. Marty Makary, known for his ties to Sesame Health, as we mentioned before, and his criticism of Big Pharma, could take a key role at the FDA. So will he be a proponent for access to GLP-1s, or will he kind of, fall the way of RFK Jr.? It'll be very interesting. It's a very interesting thing to kind of watch unfold. But I can't imagine that Dr. Makary's appointment to the FDA was not something that RFK Jr. was not a part of. So we'll have to see. This timing isn't just coincidence. It's a convergence of policy, politics, and for our part, patient advocacy that could reshape the landscape of obesity treatment, guys. This is really something that I'm extremely excited about. What does it mean for us, though? What does it mean for patients? Well, for people on Medicare and Medicaid, this proposal is an absolute game changer. Obviously, anti-obesity medications aren't cheap. We know that Wegovy costs over $1,100 for a prescription if you don't have insurance. We also know that our friends on Medicare and Medicaid are excluded from manufacturer savings programs where they could otherwise benefit for a reduction in that cost, but they get nothing at all. So expanding coverage could make these treatments accessible to millions who have just been flat out priced out of the ability to get them. And let's not forget the meta picture here. The bigger picture is treating obesity isn't just about weight. It's about preventing or managing a host of comorbidities that come with it, like diabetes, heart failure, joint issues, sleep apnea, all these things. Medicare is stepping up to cover these treatments, which could reduce the long-term healthcare costs that they face while improving quality of life for countless individuals. Now, one of the things that people always say when we talk about this topic is, it is going to cost them more in the long run because people are going to live longer. And I always think that's an interesting point to make. Like, how are those numbers sort of folded into how they determine what the ultimate costs of these are going to be? Because obviously this is going to be a massive cost to the Medicaid program up front. But long term, we know the reduction in all of these comorbidities is going to be a huge deal. So there are some shortfalls here. Obviously, as we talked about earlier, Medicaid is run by the federal government in conjunction with the state that you live in. And so it's operated at the state level. So there are some ways that they can kind of maneuver around this at the state level that could make this, like an interesting patchwork of coverage for GLP-1 medication. So it doesn't eliminate disparities entirely because states retain the flexibility in how they implement coverage. In other words, they could result in variations of the medications that they actually choose for their formulary. So while you may not get access to Wegovy, they might offer phentermine or something like that. Obviously not ideal when you think about how much better the current drugs are that are on the market than some of those older ones that they may prefer to put on their formulary, because they will be required to carry anti-obesity medications. This is part of this rule. So they might define medically necessary more narrowly than the federal government has. That's another sort of loophole that they could use. These factors are all going to come into play when it comes to Medicaid and what is done at the state level. So we'll have to kind of watch that on a state-by-state basis. Of course, PBM reforms happening in other states currently could make an impact on this as well. But ultimately, friends, this isn't just about Medicare and Medicaid. It's about a societal shift. And this is something we've been advocating for, a societal shift in the view of obesity as a disease. We're going to treat it as a disease as a government rather than a personal or moral failing or something that's strictly cosmetic. This proposal starts to change that narrative, but it also comes with all these questions that we've talked about too. How will the upcoming administration handle this? Will they implement these changes? What will we see there? The answers might not be clear yet, but one thing is, this is a huge moment for patients. This is a huge moment for advocacy workers and policymakers to come together and keep pushing for better access. It is so important that you share the information that we share here at OnThePen so that you can be better equipped to have more competent and confident conversations with your medical providing team. But this is really great news for today. We're going to celebrate it with our friends who rely on Medicare and Medicaid, because this is a wonderful day for expanded accessibility to anti-obesity medications for people to get finally the treatment that they deserve for the disease that they have. Let's get into Meriti news. So Meriti is a new anti-obesity medication, new anti-diabetes medication that has been being tested. This is a once a month, and what we learned today from a data drop is really, really great news. Now, I've been a little bit more bearish on this drug because some of the previous estimates that we had coming out of the early clinical trials were that people weren't going to adhere to this drug very well because of side effects primarily. Obviously, with a once a month or even less frequent dosing of this, you could get stuck with some negative side effects for a long time. And it appeared up front that blocking GIP, which is what this medication does, it's a GLP-1 receptor agonist, but it blocks GIP, which is kind of the anti-Zepbound and ManOnMounjaro, which actually it actually stimulates those cells, right? Binds to those receptors, and so this is kind of the anti-tirzepatide. They found that it just had some pretty gnarly side effects, but we got 52-week data now. 52-week data that showed that patients on Meriti receiving a once monthly or even less frequent dose, and they're working on that titration and dosing schedule, lost 20% of their body weight in 52 weeks, which is a really, really great number, on par to be potentially better than even some of the longer studies we've had for tirzepatide. I believe was 72 weeks, 22% body weight. The important thing to note is people weren't plateauing at that 20%. They were continuing to lose weight. And some really good news for our diabetic friends is that the weight loss was around 17% in that same time frame. So kind of bridging the gap between the disparities in weight loss between diabetic patients and non-diabetic patients in that trial as well. And the patients that were that had lost around 17% with type 2 diabetes hadn't plateaued either. So there's still runway for more weight loss. So Meriti with some really great news today. Of course, you know, the stock market is interesting sometimes. Their shares dropped about 10% today, and it's kind of like, that's interesting, because I think they were waiting for some good news from Amgen. It looks like about 90% of the people that started the phase 1 trials moved on to the phase 2 trials, which is a really good number, and kind of like, I don't know, fights back the narrative that some of those people dropped out of those early studies, but there wasn't very many people in those studies either. So it sounds like people are tolerating it well. It sounds like the dose escalation, most people experience, you know, the GI side effects, or some of the more unpleasant side effects that people experience on GLP-1s. They experience them initially when that's where most of the side effects came from, and they sort of leveled out pretty quickly within the clinical trial. So all in all, despite what the stock did today, to me, it looked like really good information, unless analysts and the people that look at this stuff more closely must have seen something in there, or maybe it was just a sell the news scenario. But whatever it was, it seems like really good news for Amgen's Meriti, which I maybe getting a little bit more bullish on with this kind of information coming out. Obviously, many people like the idea of less frequent dosing. That's something that pharmaceutical companies are looking at. Obviously, you know, they're also moving in the way of oral formulations with orforglipron from Eli Lilly, amycretin, oral amycretin from Novo Nordisk, and of course, you got Viking Therapeutics, VK2735. Roche is in the game with their Carmot Therapeutics acquisition. There is a whole host of orals. But this is the injectable that you only have to take once a month and perhaps maybe even less frequently. So we'll have to watch this one. You know we will. Hear it on the pen. Make sure you hit that like, hit that bell, hit that sub. And also thank our sponsors, Row. Row, with the Row Body Program, patients lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year when coupled with diet and exercise. You got to check out the Row program. It is really, really a wonderful program. I've been using it now. I love just the easy access to doctors, to information. The Row app is just about as slick as it comes. And they're just great people who care deeply about people struggling with the chronic disease of obesity. Of course, if you're going to look into the Row Body Program, you can use row.co/OTP to let them know that you came from here. But information is going to be there. All sorts of information about the Row Body Program, as well as information about the medication, because you never want to start a medication without knowing full on what the potential side effects are or could be for you. So check out row.co/OTP and thank them for their sponsorship of On the Pen, which has been such a valuable asset for us as we've continued to grow. We're so thankful for our partners at Row. Give them a shout out in the chat if you're watching over on YouTube. I also wanted to let you know that upcoming this week, we may have a little bit different of a schedule for On the Pen Live, which is our weekly talk show. We sat down yesterday with the CEO of Fractal Health, which is a metabolic therapeutics company working on a one and done GLP-1, a one and done. We talked about Meriti and how that's exciting. This is a one and done GLP gene therapy. We talked to the CEO of this company. So you're going to want to check out that episode. Stay tuned to the channel and we'll tell you more about what's to come with that. Also, Integrated Peptides is a sponsor here at On the Pen now that Can't Wait. We're going to be giving away bottles of Can't Wait this week. Can't wait to give away the Can't Wait. If you are interested in trying Can't Wait, drop a comment in this video. We will pick one member of the channel to get a free bottle of Can't Wait. Try it out for yourself. Love this stuff. Of course, you want to talk to your doctor before you try any new supplement. But thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do at On the Pen. I couldn't, wouldn't, and shouldn't do it without you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being such wonderful, wonderful people. I hope you all have a great, wonderful holiday this week, and we will catch you on the next one. Have a great week, friends. Bye.